Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Mind Movement Health podcast. Today, I have a very special guest on the podcast. Riana, welcome to the show.
Thank you. So glad to be here.
Well, I'm excited today because we'll be jumping in and exploring a little bit more about goal setting, but not just kind of usual goal setting. So, before we do, can you please introduce yourself to our listeners?
Absolutely. So lovely to be here with you all. My name is Riana Malia. And on the surface, I work with high achieving women who have done the work. They've been in therapy, they've done the journaling, they've done the courses and the classes, and yet there's still something that isn't quite right, right? There's still something that seems off, or they almost get what they want. And there's something that's stuck. So underneath that, what I really do is help them release all of that to clear everything that's no longer serving them so we can actually create the love and the life that's meant for them.
Which sounds pretty amazing. And, when you first sort of said women that have done, the journaling and all those steps and processes, I can relate to that. I know it's the sort of thing that kind of, see and read about that, you need to create the life you want and you need to, ask the universe and you need to journal on it. But which sounds really simple, but it's not as simple as that because I've given it a go and it didn't work out the way I thought it would.
Well, all the journaling and all the affirmations and all the vision boards and all the wonderful things in the world, it's that's great, but it's not going to actually get you what you want until you take a look at what's running underneath. So we have to actually do some rewiring of that neurology that's kind of in that unconscious, subconscious mind. Because if you think about your body, Kate, everything from the neck up is our conscious mind, right? So it's our critical faculties, it's everything we know, it's our goal setter and it's 10%, which means the rest of our body, everything from the neck down, the other 90% is our unconscious mind. So if the conscious mind is our goal setter, the unconscious is the goal getter. It's the operating system, it's the general, but it's also the literal library of everything you've ever experienced in your time on this planet. So everything that's been said to you or done to you, or anything you've said to another person, or your experiences around a failed business or a loss of a friendship or a failed marriage or all the stories and all the things is held at a cellular level. And when it's not released properly, we see things show up and manifest in the body and in our physical world like patterns and cycles that never get broken.
Mhm.
Almost achieving what you want in life, but never quite getting there. Um, Anxiety, overwhelm, autoimmune disorders, illness, injury, disease, all of those things kind of manifest in the physical. But the good news is that we can actually clear that and really rewire that neurology without going back into the pain and trauma that caused the problem in the first place, because that just keeps you in that loop of re-traumatizing yourself over and over again.
And is there a limit when it comes to the pain and the trauma? Because obviously, do you know what I mean? One person's trauma can be very different to the next person's trauma, or is it just a matter of, knowing the process and taking the time and really any type of trauma can, be processed through to help with the goal setting?
Absolutely. So in my practice, sometimes it is a woman that comes to me who's just at a pivot in her life. Like now she's empty nesting, and who is she now that, her children are gone and now she's in perimenopause, and that changes the dynamic. And maybe she's, wondering if she should pivot, whether she's has a professional career or not. And there's just this sense of like not even really being able to trust yourself. And then sometimes clients come to me who've had tremendous amount of trauma, childhood trauma, abuse, neglect, horrible losses, and the process is the same. So we clear, we create, we claim, and that's how we move through that for anyone.
And before we dive into the clearing, because I want to, sort of dive into that a little bit more, when it comes to our goal setting, can this be
Mhm.
applied to all types of goals, whether or not it's just like maybe your goal is to be able to run 10K, or maybe your goal is to be able to start a new career post a divorce? Like, does it apply across the board, or is it more to specific areas?
Everything. Whether you want to run a 10K, you want to have $10 million in the bank, you want to have, the healthiest, most amazing relationship of your life, whatever it is, doesn't matter. Applies to everything.
Amazing. So, if our first step is looking, I assume it's probably even identifying maybe areas of trauma or being stuck before into the clearing.
So I love that. So yes, before we can clear, we actually have to get clear. And so that's kind of the first step of the work in in whether we're goal setting or we're, kind of reinventing what's happening and what's next. And it's also the reason that most women, especially high functioning, high achieving women, almost get what they want, but they never do, is because of that specificity and that clarity. So it's kind of like if we went to a restaurant and we walked in and we sat down and the server came to the table and we said, I would like a beverage, a protein, a salad, and a side. And they brought us, a sparkling water, a cheeseburger, some fries, and a Caesar salad. And we got exactly what we ordered. But what we wanted was a glass of Chardonnay, some seared salmon, some roasted asparagus, and an arugula salad with beets and goat cheese, right? You see the difference? You got what you ordered, you didn't get what you wanted. So that's that clarity piece that we're going to get crystal clear on before we can clear the things that are kind of holding you back. But also in the space of clear, let me be clear that this does not require for you to relive anything. And to clear the trauma, we don't have to go back and examine what happened when you were 5. That's kind of exactly the opposite. So we get to do it in an unconscious way so that we can clear all the negative emotion that's currently being held in the body that keeps you from getting what you want.
Mm. And if there is maybe trauma that's occurred that people have potentially like blocked out or they don't remember it until sometimes there's a trigger and things like that. Can that trauma affect you as well when it comes to this? And if so, is that stuff that you can work on as well, even though you might not even be 100% aware of what's actually happened?
Absolutely. So one of the biggest things in the clearing stage is a modality that I use called quantum time release. And this has been used for hundreds and probably thousands of years. So it's a multi-dimensional technique that's designed to do exactly that, clear a lifetime of all that energetic weight. So if you think about a piece of ribbon for every single negative emotion, so anger, sadness, fear, guilt, shame, and any of those limiting beliefs and limiting decisions that is formed as a result of the trauma that we've experienced throughout our life, they each have their own ribbon. And as we go through life, every time we have a significant emotional experience with anger, for instance, there's a marble that goes on that ribbon. Sadness, marbles go on that ribbon. Fear, shame, guilt, all of it. So if something happens today that makes you sad, it's not so much about the today, it's the 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years of marbles. And that's that gestalt. That's that charge. And that's what we get to release in quantum time release. And what's beautiful about that is you don't need to, in fact, we're not looking for anything you have conscious memory of to clear all of that. We're actually looking for the root cause, which is an unconscious process. So whether it's trauma that you're fully aware of, trauma that you've worked on, trauma that you've kind of resolved, trauma that you haven't resolved, it doesn't matter. We can take care of all of it at that level.
That's amazing. And so, what are kind of the first steps of looking to clear this trauma?
Yeah. So again, it really is, getting clear on first of all what you want, where you are, where you've been, kind of what's happened, and then getting crystal clear on what you want and understanding that in the clearing is giving up and letting go of all those things that no longer serve you and keep you stuck and keep you from getting what you want, right? And then we get to move into the creation stage where it's really about stepping into embodying these new beliefs and this new energetic alignment and giving you the skills to go with the knowledge and replacing old behavior neurology strategy with new. Because a lot of times in this work, there's a lot of focus on clarity and awareness, which is great because that's the foundation for any change and transformation. Whether, you're going to start running, training for a marathon, or you're, going to reimagine your entire life, you have to have some clarity and awareness. But a lot of it stops there. And that's maddening because if we don't give you the skills to go with the knowledge, you just end up in the same loop, right? And the unconscious mind can't fill in the blank. And then we'll talk about that again when we talk about goal setting of why traditional goal setting never works for the most part. But the unconscious mind can't fill in the blanks. So Of course, if you do some work and you have some ahas and you have some clarity and awareness and that feels really good and you're making progress and then life happens, which it always will, it's why 99% of people go right back to where they started. They don't even stay in that progress space because they didn't replace what they were blowing out. They didn't replace the strategy and neurology and behavior and the ways that they think and the things that they focus on and how they, their place in the world. So when we do that in that create stage, that gives us the ability to then move into where we get to own it and embody it. But it's in that create stage where once we've gotten really clear on what we want, then we kind of activate that aligned achievement framework, which is the quantum goal setting.
Mm. And if let's just use that analogy of training for a marathon because it's simple and easy to
Yeah.
use as an example. If someone decides that yes, they want to train for a marathon and then, they start working with you and they do the clearing and that, but maybe there's things in their life. So maybe it's a mum who's got two kids who's working full time and, she really wants to do this. But as you said, life gets in the way. One of the kids gets sick, her husband's working long hours. So trying to navigate how to get to this goal. And as you said, that's when people usually tend to go, all right, this is all just going to be too hard. I'm going to give up and then, kind of come back to it. How does, the quantum goal setting and the strategies help somebody in, say, that kind of example?
Absolutely. So traditional goal setting says, all right, today's date, we're going to set a goal for 3 months or 6 months or by the end of the year, whatever it is, right? So we'll just use the end of the year as the example. So, all right, by December 31st, I want to be ready to run a 10K or I want to, be celebrating having finished a 10K. Got it. And you're like, okay, I'm going to start today. So between now and then, what do I need to do? And you start thinking about those things and you might jot them down and like, okay, I have a plan. That feels good. But the problem is, like we referred to a little earlier ago, was that, you know, the unconscious mind can't fill in the blank. So when we're goal setting and we're going from here to there, it can't fill in those steps. So you miss about 75% of the most important steps of actually achieving the goal. So what we do in my practice is we reverse engineer that goal. And here's what that looks like. So we create a goal in a very specific format. And then I ask you to tell me exactly what happens right before you achieve it. What has to happen so that you know you're there? So maybe if we're using the example of the running a marathon or whatever, how do you know that you're ready? Or how do you know you've achieved it? I crossed the finish line. I broke that, or I crossed the finish line, right? That would be having run one. And then we make it a movie. So we actually have you experience all the senses, right? What do you see? What do you hear? What are you feeling? What are you touching? What are you smelling in the air? All the things. Because the brain doesn't know the difference between something that's actually happened and something that is visualized with emotion, right? We see that with athletes all the time. Like Michael Phelps, the last time he swam in the Olympics, he had visualized that swim so many times. So when he dove in and his goggles broke, he swam blind. But he had his body, his brain he knew how many strokes to the wall. And I think he won gold or something crazy with no goggles. So the brain had already experienced swimming that specific swim. So when we have that experience now, it ignites the reticular activating system in our brain to be laser focused, looking for the people, the resources, the experiences, the opportunities to make sure that we actually achieve that goal instead of just between now and dead, just wishing for it. But the actual creation of it is then what we do is after that moment of how do you know you're there, then we micro step backwards by asking the question, what has to happen just before that? What has to happen just before that? And so as we're really close to the goal being accomplished, it's so micro stepped, like what has to happen just before that? Well, I had to, hit that last 100 yards. Well, what has to happen just before that? Well, I had to start the marathon. Well, so it's very micro. And then as we get farther and farther away, it's a little bit not as, every minute or every hour of the day. But then you have this blueprint. So when the kids are sick and your husband's working late and you're tired and you're like, I don't even know what my name is, let alone what to do next. You just look down and you have this beautiful blueprint and you just do the next thing. It's a one baby step at a time. But that process and then taking that a step further and installing that process, installing that goal on your future timeline, which is just that again, that's that process of like the brain experiencing it as though it's happened. And then your entire timeline kind of reorganizes itself. But it's so powerful and it makes all the difference in the world. I had a really fun story, if I might share. A client in New York had come to me because she was going through this divorce that had been taking forever and she'd been, dealing with that. And then she'd already had another relationship with somebody else for over a year. And then that had ended. And she's like, I just keep attracting the same people over and over, which is a very common thing that people say to me when we start our work together. And there's a reason for that. But anyway, long story short, we did all this incredible work. And a few weeks in, her girlfriends, they had a Friday night happy hour and they're like, we need to talk to you. And she's like, what's up? They're like, are you on drugs? She's like, what? No, why would you ask me that? And they said, well, usually you come to happy hour and you complain about your ex-husband and all these things and everything's wrong and everyone's annoying and all these people. And they're like, they said to her, you seem a lot happier and nicer, frankly. And you've been talking about all these things that you kind of seem excited about. And so for her, that feedback from them was like amazing because sometimes it's hard to see it in ourselves. So we dealt with that. But as a byproduct of all that work that we'd done, we reverse engineered her dream job. And there was a Monday, and her dream job didn't exist. So she was feeling quite nervous about throwing a goal out there for, there wasn't, she just had gotten another degree, maybe a master's in mental health, and she wanted to work with adolescents in her community. And there wasn't a practice anywhere in her county for specifically what she wanted to do. So on Thursday, she left me a voicemail. She was literally screaming. She's like, you're never going to believe this. I just got an offer for my dream job, and they asked if I wanted to open a practice 5 minutes from my house. And so it's those kinds of things where, it's just everything shifts. And then you get to become that magnet for miracles, and everything changes.
Mm. And that, like hearing that story, that's where I've heard, stories before where they're like, they put it out to the universe, like this is what they want, and then the universe delivers. How much, is there any of that, or is it all really we are in control and, the universe is great, but it's really not doing any of the work?
Well, it's both. So we don't attract what we want. We attract where like what we're, who we are, how we're acting, and what our frequency is. And that starts with the thoughts that we're thinking. So if you're somebody that, is thinking, oh, I always start this stuff. I'm not going to finish it because I just, I'm tired and then all of the reasons why you shouldn't do your, go train, do your running, it'll just all show up. And it's this great self-fulfilling prophecy. Kind of the same thing, like if you think about thoughts are so powerful, and there's a law, it's an actual law of physics that if you hold a thought for 17 seconds, that it starts anchoring in and attracting other energy on that same frequency. If you do it for 68 seconds, then there's momentum in the brain. And you start drawing in whatever you're vibrating at. Okay, so think about like a radio station. So what's your favorite music?
Mm, 80s music, really.
Okay. And what's some music you cannot stand?
Oh, like really alternative heavy.
Okay, perfect. So I want you to imagine everything you want for your life. Running the marathon, healthy relationships, abundance, well-being, all the things. It's on this station 101.5, and it's all 80s all day, all the time. It's awesome. But you're stuck down here on station 99.5, which is this horrible, hideous, heavy metal alternative, and we can't turn it off. We can't even turn it down. It's just screaming at us. And so when we're down there, we can't hear 80s music. So how do you listen to the 80s music? You have to change the channel, right? You have to change the frequency to tune in to that vibration. So let me give you an example. You are driving somewhere in the morning, and for the most part, you wake up and you're content and you're in a good mood and you're just kind of doing your thing and everything's fine. and you get on the freeway or the highway, and then somebody just like comes in front of you and cuts you off and almost makes you crash, and it throws you and it rattles you and it, makes you frustrated and mad, frankly. So then you get to where you're going and you tell your colleagues or your bestie that you're meeting for coffee or your husband or whatever, like, oh my God, this jerk just completely ran me off the road. So you're telling it, right? And you're telling it again. Maybe you tell, somebody else about, oh, my morning started so ridiculous. So then you go to the grocery store and you're in line and you have like two things, and the person in front of you has like 35 things, and the cashier is the first day on the job and they don't know what they're doing. And is that a coincidence? No, because you've been talking about and vibrating this angry energy. So the universe is just going to keep handing you stuff that's going to make you angry. It's all about vibration and frequency and being able to understand that and how to instantly shift that to raise your frequency and raise that energy and raise that vibration so that you can actually get what you want and become a magnet for miracles rather than being that person that always gets the short end of the stick, right? There's never a parking spot. There's, everybody always screws everything up on my order. And you know those types of people, right? Nothing ever goes right for them because that's the frequency they're vibrating on, and it's all that they can call in. So the beautiful thing about that is it's so easy to shift. So easy.
Mm. So then I want to sidestep almost to ask about karma. And if that has any relation back to frequency, only because coming back from my most recent trip, our flight got delayed. Overall, it kept getting delayed, like a couple of hours and then another couple of hours and then 4 hours, and it ended up being delayed by 9 hours in total. So by the time we got on the plane, everybody is exhausted, and I was sat away from my family next to a couple of people. We've all been there on flights where, you've got some large people next to you and you're thinking, I don't even have half my seat. And I asked the, flight attendant very nicely if there was a seat near my family and if I could possibly move. And she said, yes, just a couple of rows in front of your family. I can move you to there. And the whole row is free. So you'd have the row to yourself. And I was like, oh, that'd be amazing. Thank you. Like, this is amazing. So in my mind, I'm like, oh, that's karma. Like, as in, it almost felt like we got delayed and we had that trouble, but still trying to, I guess, find the best in situation and be nice and all the rest of it. I felt like, oh, the universe delivered. But does karma have anything to do with frequency, or is that just me kind of like coming up with things to make myself feel better?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think karma for sure is real, and karma is energetic too. And karma is it's all frequency, it's all energy. Like, how you show up, how you treat people. I love that example that you gave because the second you started talking about planes being delayed, when whenever that happens, I immediately go to that place of we are being protected from something, whether it's the flight itself or it's we would land on time and get in the car and be on a road we shouldn't be on in a moment we shouldn't be on it. I always feel so protected by those types of things. And when you can stay in the energy of we're being protected, there's nothing we can do about it anyway. Let's make the best of it. Then amazing things like that happen over and over and over again. What good is it going to do to be, frustrated and upset? And then you're a jerk to the people that are doing their job who are equally as tired as you are. And, it's just a miserable cycle. So, you being in that energy of like, there's nothing we can do. I would really love to be closer to my family. This seat is, not super comfortable. And not only did you get to move and be closer to your family, you had the whole row. So probably some of them ended up, maybe your kids came and snuggled you or sat in their husband next to you, whatever it was. So all of that it's all part of frequency and energy, 1,000%.
Mm. And then when it comes to goal setting, I've heard before when you are goal setting that you don't say, I will or I'm going to. You say it in the like as in you're doing it now. Even though the marathon you wanted to do, you want to be able to do it by December, you still say, I'm running it, like now, or I can do it. Like it's all in the present rather than talking about it in a future tense.
Yes. So when we set the goal, this would be an example. So I'm celebrating fill in the blank. I'm so excited that I accomplished fill in the blank. So let's say it's, on December 31st, 2025 or sooner, because we always want to give the universe the opportunity to deliver faster and easier, right? December 31st, 2025 or sooner, I'm celebrating finishing my first marathon. Boom. It's anchored on that date. And then once we install that goal and then things start happening and we are, moving backwards. Now people say, but what if it doesn't happen? Okay, well, here's the thing. If you are moving forward and taking inspired action and keep in that energy of you are celebrating this, you got to let go of the how and the when. Because back to our restaurant, we wouldn't order a protein salad, a side, and a beverage and expect to get exactly what they want because they can't read our mind. Just like we wouldn't place our order and then every 5 minutes go back into the kitchen and barge into the kitchen and say, are you cooking my salmon at 350 or 375? And did you triple wash the arugula? And then go back to the table and then go and ask, are you going to bring dessert at 7 or 7:05? No, we would enjoy our time together, enjoy our meal, catch up, knowing with absolute certainty when our order is ready, it will be delivered, right? We're not going to micromanage and obsess because when we are so attached to the how, it's very limited because our mind can only imagine so many possibilities. And when we get stuck in the how, it actually pushes back the achievement or the calling in of those goals or those relationships or those, those things that we want to do and have. It pushes them back because it's very limited. So if we give the universe the opportunity to figure it out, it's not our job to figure out the how or the when. Just this is what's going to happen. This is what I'm celebrating. You let those pieces come together and and let the universe deliver.
Mm. And when it comes to the clearing of that trauma, is there things that people can do by themselves, or is it always better to be working with a professional because depending on what traumas you have, it may bring up other things?
So again, and I love therapy. I all of those things we talked about earlier, therapy, talking with your girlfriends, reading books, taking courses, all those things are beneficial. But when you are stuck in the story and you continue to, tell it and stay in it, it's impossible to move forward. And most of the women that I work with are intelligent, they're emotionally intelligent, and they've figured out a lot of stuff. And they're like, why can't I just figure this out? Well, when you keep doing things the same way, right? We're going to keep doing it the same way. We can't actually fix the problem. And when I say the problem, you are not the problem, right? You're not broken. There's nothing wrong with you. It's just old patterns and old wiring. So it's kind of like being in a garden and just finding some weeds and we're just going to, pluck the top off and it's just going to grow right back, right? So that's doing it the same way. That's, talking about it in therapy and dissecting it and talking about the divorce with your girlfriends and how awful it is or whatever it is. You're just putting the top off. So instead, if we tap into the unconscious, that's when we get to do things differently. And so to answer your question, my answer to that is often, you're brilliant, smart, incredible human. If you could have done this, you would have. It's not that you're not willing or able or capable. You just can't. It's not a conscious mind issue. It's an unconscious mind issue. So when we go at it differently, then we get out of that loop of when we just keep doing the same thing, we lose more time, more money, more energy, and more faith, really, that we'll ever actually accomplish or get what we want, whatever that is. So my point is you cannot solve a problem with the same mind that created it. You have to do it differently. You have to tap into that other piece, that other 90%. So are there things that you can do on your own? Absolutely. But it's kind of like, if you have a toothache and you go to the dentist and they're like, well, I can tell you what to do and you can go figure it out. And it can, you can do that for sure over the course of the next year, or I can do it for you in an hour and get rid of the pain. So it's kind of the same thing. There are things now you can't do quantum time release on yourself, and there's a lot of this work that you just simply can't do alone. But what I do teach you is I teach you all the things that you can do on your own, and that you can teach your children or your spouse or your family or your best friends, so that it's not just about you. It really impacts everyone in your life. Because when you have that energetic transformation and you're able to clear all of that stuff. It isn't just about you. It's about your family, your friends, your community, and really the whole world.
Mm. And is there any place in this work, or does that have any relation back to hypnotherapy?
No, you don't
Okay.
use any hypnosis. And when I talk about like quantum time release being an unconscious process, you're not unconscious. You would be very comfy in, wherever you are on your sofa or a big comfy chair or even lying on your bed. But you would be very relaxed and we would be just tapping into the unconscious to get the answers that we need to clear the root cause of all of that negative emotion so we can release it all. So it's not hypnosis and it's not, breath work. It is in and of itself, it's multidimensional in that there's timeline work there, there's alchemical forgiveness, there's clearing of, the energy at 10 layers and 10 levels so that you can actually get rid of all the noise and really anchor in to the truth of who you really are. Because that's the other piece is sometimes at this time in life, we don't really know who we are. We've been something for a long time. And now that's shifting or changing. And that question that I ask everyone and that often brings people to tears is like, I don't know what I want because I've been doing everything for everyone else for so long. I don't even know who I am. Like, who is that? So we get to really discover that and get to step into her so that when we get to that claim phase of the three phases, then you get to embody that and lead from that and love from that. And then you just get to, you know, really own that space of, you know, confidently expressing your needs and holding boundaries and deepening the richness in every single one of your relationships and stepping into that version of you that feels like you.
Mm. And listening, to all this and chatting about it, it kind of, makes me think about general goal setting and so many people believing that the reasons they don't reach their goals is because they're not disciplined enough, or they're not consistent enough. And they often are just blaming themselves for their own, belief of what they think is just inaction. But, learning all about this, that really doesn't seem the case at all.
Right. And then when we do that and we beat ourselves up and we say, see, I don't even know why I didn't finish it. I never do, blah, blah, blah. I start another course. I never finished it. I start training for this marathon and then I don't finish it. And it's that again, when you're blaming, complaining, justifying, even blaming yourself, you are in low frequency vibrations. So it's a trap. And it also takes away that thing of like, there's something wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. We just got to do it differently. And by flipping that, even just the act of flipping it and reverse engineering it, even without the goal installation on your timeline and all of those things, 1,000% will change the game.
Mm. And is there anything that we haven't kind of delved into around this topic this morning that you'd like to kind of highlight?
Just that, just because it's always been doesn't mean it has to continue to be. I think a lot of people get so stuck in, well, this is how I've always been, or this is how it's always been for me, or this is how I've always shown up and I never finish things or I procrastinate too much. And then it's just one more thing that reminds me that, I'm a failure or that I don't do what I say I'm going to do or whatever it is. So what? And that's the past. We can actually fix that in the moment. So this is very random and off the, it's just, this is what's coming up for me right now. But so in my work, part of obviously in the create phase, we do this process together. But I would just love to give anyone who says, you know what, I want to learn how to do this. I would love to give your listeners, I'll give you the whole aligned achievement framework and it'll, kind of walk you through so you could do some of this on your own. And then if you feel called and want to take it a step further, I'm here to have that conversation. But I would love to be able to offer that to your listeners.
Oh, that would be amazing. So I'll make sure I link it up in the show notes too. So listeners head across there to grab that and we'll make sure it's all there when the show notes go up.
Yeah. And then one last thing I'd love to share, and I know that it might seem like it's not connected, but I promise it is. So my team and I have spent the last year developing this assessment called the Ellie. And the LE stands for an extraordinary love index. And you might think, well, why are we talking about, a love index right now in this context? Because it's the insight that you're going to get from this is unlike probably anything you've ever gotten. And it's not just about love. It's not just about romantic love. It's about, loving yourself. And a lot of this comes back to that. But it's going to look at 9 key areas. And then I'm going to send you a 28-page report that breaks down all of that. And you're going to, and you might be surprised by some, and some might make a lot of sense. But what it's going to do is it's going to give you this clear path of where you might be blocked, what you might be experiencing, whether it's professionally, personally, in any area. And then I actually give you actionable items of how to kind of get yourself out of that, depending on what those scores are. So the LE is also on the web. Everything's at rianamalia.com, so it's easy to find. But that would also be an incredible gift. And it's not like a what Disney princess are you quiz. It's an actual certified assessment. It's 40 questions. So give yourself a good, 10 or 15 minutes to be able to thoughtfully answer the questions. And then the insight that you're going to get is going to impact every area of your life.
Well, as we talk about a lot on this podcast, everything's interconnected, whether or not, you're talking about your physical health to your mental health,
Yeah,
to your relationships, as you were saying before, our energy and our vibration, like that connection is there throughout.
absolutely. It's all connected.
Now, before we finish up, I always like to ask my guests as their kind of final question that if there's one thing that our listeners could go do after listening to this podcast that they could go off and instigate straight away, what would it be?
So, given we've been talking about goal setting today, here's what I want you to do. I want you to think about when you close out this year, when we're on New Year's Eve, wherever you are in the world, and if there could be something that would just give you so much joy and feel so proud of yourself and give you so much peace and happiness to say, I accomplished this in this year. What is that thing? And then I want you to think about what that looks like and actually start playing around with just jotting it down. And then can give you the format of how to set it all up, and I'll send that all to you guys. But just I want you to start thinking in that way, because that's how the brain then starts to rewire of what it's looking at and what it's focusing on. Because most of the time, people don't realize they're always focusing on the things they don't want instead of what they do. And it's why they continue to get what they don't want, right? So I don't want to have, this extra weight on my body anymore. I don't want to be alone. I don't want to be in debt anymore. I don't want to be in this financial position. I don't want to hurt when I get out of bed in the morning. I don't want to, and it's like they feel like that's mindset work and that they're declaring that they don't want that. But the universe and the unconscious mind doesn't hear the clarifying don't. All it hears is what you're focusing on. And that's why you keep getting the same thing over and over. You end up in the same circumstances, the same relationships. You never accomplish the goals. You don't get the job that you want. It's that complex and that simple.
Almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy, like.
Yeah, totally. Totally.
Amazing. Now, where can our listeners reach out and connect with you and find out more?
Yes. So rianamalia.com is the website. And then all my socials are at Riana Malia, Rianamalia.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I think this has been a really enlightening conversation. I know that I'm going to walk away and start tweaking a few more things. And definitely, when you send those links through, I'm going to check them out as well, because I think this is one area, even though some people say that they don't set goals, everybody's, they say they don't set goals, but people have dreams and aspirations, which are a type of goal. So we're all thinking about things that we would ultimately like for ourselves or our family or whatever it is. So I think it's a really applicable topic. And as you said, if we can start doing it with these things in mind and this framework, then maybe things will start to change.
Absolutely. I promise they will.
Amazing. Well, thanks for coming on the show, and I'll be sure to link everything up into the show notes so listeners head across there as well.
Beautiful. Thanks so much for having me.